The Awakening. The year was 2257, and the distant human colony of Haven was under siege. The Mullen, a technologically advanced and brutal alien race, had launched an attack, capturing and torturing the youngest and most vulnerable members of the colony. Among them was 8-year-old Lily Roth, whose cries of agony were broadcast across the galaxy as a twisted message to humanity. Back on Earth, deep within a secret military base, alarms blared. In the cryogenics chamber, a pod hissed open, and Walter Hill, Earth's most lethal super soldier, emerged from his frozen slumber. His augmented eyes quickly adjusted to the sterile environment as he felt the chill of stasis still clinging to his muscular frame. "Soldier Hill, report for emergency briefing immediately," a voice commanded over the intercom. Walter moved with urgency, his genetically engineered body already alert and primed for action. He had no idea how long he'd been asleep or why he had been awakened, but the instinctive pull towards a threat was unmistakable. He strode into the briefing room, where grim-faced officers awaited him. General Mattis, his weathered face lined with anger, spoke first. "Hill, we have a situation. The Malin hit Haven Colony. They slaughtered the adults and took a captive." The general gritted his teeth. "A little girl, Lily Roth, 8 years old. They tortured her, pushed her until her body collapsed and broadcast the whole goddamn thing." White-hot rage ignited in Walter's chest as brutal images flashed on the screen. He saw a child's bruised and bloodied face, alien claws tearing into soft flesh, and Lily's desperate screams as she begged them to stop. "Why?" Walter asked, his voice a low growl. "They wanted to see the limits of human endurance, the boundaries of our biology and psyche. They wanted to know how far they could push us before we break." Mattis explained. "It's a message, Hill. They're toying with us, testing our resolve." Earth had a tentative peace with the Mullen, a careful dance of diplomacy and veiled threats. The technologically advanced aliens could easily overpower humanity's defenses if they chose, but this was a line crossed, a gauntlet thrown down. Lily managed to send a distress signal. Mattis continued. "She bought us a shot at getting her back. That's where you come in." Walter stood straighter, his body practically vibrating with a need for violence. "What are my orders, sir?" "You're to infiltrate Malin space, rescue the girl, and send a very pointed message. We will not be trifled with. Our children are sacred, and we will rain hell on anyone who forgets that." General Mattis paused, his gaze boring into Walter. "You're our best, most ruthless asset. The Malin wanted to see the unleashed potential of humanity. Let's give them a front-row seat." Walter nodded grimly. The aliens had made a fatal error. They thought they knew human weaknesses, thought they could exploit human limits, but they had never faced anything like him. He suited up in cutting-edge armor, a sleek black shell that felt like a second skin. He armed himself with an arsenal of devastating weapons, plasma rifles, neurotoxin grenades, and retractable blades sharp enough to slice through bone. As he boarded the stealth ship destined for Malin territory, Walter felt no fear, no hesitation. He was forged for this, honed into a living weapon. He would carve a path of destruction through the alien forces, paint their ships red with their own blood. Failure was not an option. Lily was counting on him. Every human was counting on him. The Malin would learn the depths of human wrath, the price of waking the monsters they fought to control. Earth's most lethal defender was awake, and God helped the aliens who stood in his way. Infiltration. Walter's stealth ship, the Spectre, cut through the void of space like a knife, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Malin sensors. The massive alien dreadnought loomed ahead, a behemoth of metal and malice. Walter studied the intel on his display, his eyes narrowing at the sight of the formidable vessel. It was heavily shielded, overflowing with weapons, and crawling with elite Malin guards. Getting in wouldn't be easy, but for Lily, he'd find a way. As the Spectre drew closer, an unusual energy reading caught Walter's attention. He ran a scan, confirming his suspicions. A hidden research lab likely where the Malin subjected Lily to their brutal experiments. White-hot fury surged through his veins at the thought of what they put her through. Walter guided the Spectre to a blind spot along the dreadnought's hull and docked with a barely audible clank. He checked his weapons one last time, ensuring his plasma rifle was fully charged and his neurotoxin grenades were primed. With a deep breath, he cycled the airlock and stepped into the belly of the beast. The corridor was dimly lit, the air thick with the acrid stench of Malin. Walter's augmented senses were on high alert, his genetically enhanced muscles coiled and ready for action. He moved with the lethal grace of a predator, his footsteps nearly silent on the metal grating. A patrol of Malin guards rounded the corner, their reptilian eyes widening in surprise at the sight of the intruder. They reached for their weapons, but Walter was faster. He blurred into motion, his speed and reflexes far beyond anything the aliens had encountered. In a flurry of brutal strikes, he dispatched the guards, their bodies crumpling to the floor. Walter quickly stripped one of the fallen Malin and donned their armor, hoping the disguise would buy him some time. He dragged the bodies out of sight and pressed on, his mind racing as he navigated the labyrinthine ship. Hacking into a control panel, Walter accessed a map of the dreadnought. The lab was deep within the vessel, but he also noticed a cell block nearby. His heart pounded as he realized that must be where they were keeping Lily. Every fiber of his being screamed to go to her immediately, but he knew he needed to be smart. He had to find out what the Malin did to her and why. Just as Walter finalized his approach, alarms blared throughout the ship. A cold dread settled in his gut. They discovered his breached airlock. Red lights flashed and klaxons wailed as a detachment of Malin hunter-killers, their deadliest warriors, was dispatched to his position. Stealth was no longer an option. Now it was kill or be killed. Walter armed his most devastating weapons, knowing he'd need every advantage to fight his way through the ship. As he battled deeper into the dreadnought, he planted explosive charges at key structural points, a fail-safe in case things went wrong. He'd blow this entire vessel to hell before he let the Malin stop him. Smoke filled the corridors as Walter carved a path of destruction, his plasma rifle searing through Malin flesh and armor alike. Their agonized screams echoed off the walls, but he tuned them out, his focus absolute. He had to get to Lily. Finally, he burst into the cell block, his eyes frantically scanning the rows of dimly lit cages. There, in the far corner, a small human figure lay curled on the floor. Walter's heart clenched as he raced to her cell, ripping the door open with a screech of metal. Lily looked so fragile, her tiny form battered and bruised, but she was alive, unconscious but alive. Walter reached for her, but a menacing voice crackled over the ship's comms. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," it warned. It was Pixis, the ruthless Malin commander. "Surrender now, or watch the girl die as I flood her cell with lethal gas." A growl built in Walter's throat. He knew it was a bluff. Pixis would never harm his precious test subject. Without responding, he gathered Lily in his arms, cradling her close as he sprinted for the lab. He had to find out the truth of what they did to her before the whole ship came down on their heads. Barricading the lab door behind him, Walter laid Lily gently on a table and turned to the alien computers. His fingers flew over the keys as he hacked into the mainframe, his eyes widening in horror at what he found. The Malin weren't just torturing Lily for the sake of cruelty. They were mapping her brain, trying to isolate the genes that give humans their psionic potential. A cold realization washed over Walter. If the Malin succeeded in unlocking humanity's latent abilities for themselves, they'd become an unstoppable force. This mission was no longer just about saving one little girl. It was about preventing an existential threat to his entire species. Gritting his teeth, Walter scooped up Lily and blasted out of the lab, a horde of hunter-killers hot on his heels. Plasma bolts sizzled past his head as he charged through the ship, the staccato beat of his boots pounding against the deck. He had to get Lily to the Spectre, had to get her to safety, Then he could lead the charge to end the Malin threat once and for all. The escape. With a final leap, Walter hurled himself and Lily into the Spectre, slamming the hatch shut behind them. As the stealth ship detached from the dreadnought and slipped into the stars, Walter rushed to the medbay, gently laying Lily on the examination table. He activated the ship's advanced medical systems, muttering, "Hold on, kid." Scanners hummed to life, bathing Lily in blue light as data flashed across the screens. Vital signs, cellular damage, neural patterns. Walter's eyes narrowed as he processed the information. The Malin's experiments had taken a heavy toll on her body, but there was still hope. He worked tirelessly, administering regenerative treatments and carefully calibrated doses of nanites. Slowly, Lily's condition stabilized. The bruises on her skin began to fade, and her breathing steadied. With Lily out of immediate danger, Walter opened a secure channel to Earth Command. General Mattis's face appeared on the screen, lined with worry. "Report, Hill." Walter's face hardened. "Sir, the situation is worse than we thought. The Malin weren't just torturing Lily. They're after our psionic potential." He uploaded his findings from the alien lab. Mattis's eyes widened as he reviewed the data. "My God," the general breathed. "If they harnessed this, they'd be unstoppable." "Exactly," Walter said grimly. Mattis's expression hardened. "Get that girl back to Earth immediately. We need to know everything she experienced. In the meantime, I'm mobilizing our fleets. The Malin have crossed a line. We're taking the fight to them." Walter nodded, cutting the transmission. He plotted a course for Earth, pushing the Spectre's engines to their limits. Hours passed as Walter checked on Lily regularly, relief washing over him as color returned to her cheeks. She stirred, eyelids fluttering. Suddenly, alarms blared. Walter sprinted to the cockpit, hands flying over the controls as a massive Malin frigate phased into view, weapons locked on the Spectre. A familiar voice crackled over the comms. "Did you think you could escape so easily?" Commander Pix's reptilian features filled the screen, eyes gleaming with malice. "Return the girl, and I might let you live." Walter's response was to open fire. The Spectre's energy weapons lanced out, but the Malin ship's shields held firm. The space around them erupted into chaos. Walter's hands danced across the controls as the Spectre spun and weaved through a barrage of plasma bolts. But the Malin frigate was relentless, its superior firepower hammering the stealth ship's defenses. Warning lights flashed. Shields failing, hull integrity compromised. Walter gritted his teeth, scanning for options. His eyes locked onto a dense field of asteroids ahead. Without hesitation, he plunged the Spectre into the swirling mass of rock and ice. The Malin frigate followed, its bulk working against it as it tried to navigate the treacherous terrain. Walter's augmented reflexes were pushed to their limits as he corkscrewed the Spectre through impossibly narrow gaps, using the asteroids as cover. A massive chunk of rock exploded next to them, pummeling the hull with debris. The Malin ship wasn't faring much better, its shields flaring as it smashed through smaller asteroids, unable to match the Spectre's agility. Walter saw his chance. He cut the engines, letting the Spectre drift behind a particularly large asteroid. The Malin frigate lumbered past, momentarily losing sight of its prey. In that instant, Walter made his move. He space-jumped from the Spectre, his armored form hurtling through the void. He slammed into the Malin ship's hull, magnetic boots locking on as he drew his plasma cutter. Walter carved his way inside, dispatching Malin guards with brutal efficiency. He fought his way deeper into the ship, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. In the frigate's labs, Walter uncovered horrifying evidence. Stasis pods holding grisly altered Malin warriors, their DNA spliced with human genes. The aliens had already begun weaponizing humanity's psionic potential. Walter's blood ran cold. This had to end now. He burst onto the bridge, face to face with Commander Pixis. The Malin leader's eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "You're too late, human," Pixis snarled. The air crackled with energy as Pixis unleashed a psionic assault. Walter staggered, his mind assaulted by waves of alien force. He pushed back, drawing on every ounce of his enhanced physiology. Their battle raged across the bridge, a clash of raw physical power and newly awakened psionic abilities. Consoles sparked and crumpled under the onslaught. Walter felt his strength failing, Pixis's attacks growing stronger. But as the Malin commander prepared a killing blow, Walter saw an opening. He lunged forward, augmented muscles propelling him with inhuman speed. His fist connected with Pixis's jaw with a sickening crunch. The alien crumpled, the glow fading from his eyes. Gasping for breath, Walter secured Pixis and set the frigate's self-destruct sequence. He raced back to his entry point, space jumping to the waiting Spectre moments before the Malin ship erupted in a massive fireball. Walter stumbled into the medbay. To his surprise, Lily was awake, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "It's okay," he said softly, collapsing into a chair beside her. "You're safe now." As the Spectre resumed its course to Earth, Walter couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. They'd won this battle, but the war was just beginning, and humanity would need every advantage to survive what was coming. Return to Earth. The Spectre burst through Earth's orbital defense grid, alarms blaring as Walter guided the battered ship to a docking bay. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. They'd made it. His relief was short-lived as Walter carried Lily's unconscious form down the ramp. General Matisse rushed to meet them, his face grim. "Hill, we've got incoming." A massive Malin fleet just entered the system. Walter's blood ran cold. "How many?" "Hundreds of ships. They're making a beeline for our outer colonies." Before Walter could respond, a team of medics swarmed around them, whisking Lily away on a gurney. He watched helplessly as they rushed her toward a nearby shuttle. "Where are they taking her?" Walter demanded. "Secure facility planetside," Mattis replied. "Our top psionics researchers are standing by. Right now, that girl might be our best shot at understanding what we're up against." Walter nodded, his face hardened. "What's our next move?" Mattis led him towards a sleek, menacing vessel docked nearby. "This is the EDF Dauntless, the newest ship in the fleet, armed with experimental tech based on what we've learned about Malin psionics. You're taking her out." "Me?" Walter blinked in surprise. "You've got more combat experience against these bastards than anyone. We need you out there, buying us time while we get our defenses in order," Mattis said. Walter stepped aboard the Dauntless, taking in the cutting-edge bridge as the crew prepped for launch. He studied the weapon schematics, psionic disruptor cannons. He hoped they'd be enough. The next hours passed in a blur of frantic action. Walter pushed the Dauntless to its limits, dancing through Malin formations. They struck hard and fast, crippling engines and weapons systems before vanishing back into the void. But for every Malin ship they took down, two more seemed to appear. Walter watched grimly as the alien armada inexorably advanced, leaving broken human colonies in their wake. "This isn't working," he growled. "We need to take out their command and control." He laid out a plan to his crew. A strike team would infiltrate the Malin flagship, while the Dauntless provided a distraction. It was a suicide mission, but no one hesitated. They fought their way through twisting corridors, the air thick with the stench of ozone and alien blood. Walter's enhanced reflexes were pushed to their limits as they battled Malin warriors wielding terrifying new abilities. In the heart of the ship, Walter came face to face with his worst nightmare, a Malin soldier, its body warped and twisted, eyes glowing with stolen human consciousness. As their minds clashed, Walter felt like his skull was being torn apart. With a final desperate surge of will, Walter overcame the abomination. As it crumpled to the deck, he stared in horror at what the Malin had wrought. Warning klaxons blared as Walter's team raced back to their infiltration craft, the Malin flagship imploding behind them in an expanding ball of fire and twisted metal. In the aftermath of the battle, Walter stood on the Dauntless's observation deck, staring at the debris field. They'd won, but at a terrible cost. And according to the transmissions they'd intercepted, this was only the beginning. A priority message flashed on his console. Earth Command was ordering him planetside immediately, something about Lily and a psionic time bomb. Walter's gut clenched as he set course for home. Whatever was coming, he had a feeling their trials were far from over. The Psi bomb. Walter strode into the secure facility, his boots echoing on the sterile floor. The air hummed with tension as he entered the observation room. Through the reinforced glass, he saw Lily lying on a bed, her small form racked with spasms. Dr. Eliza Chen, the lead researcher, approached him with a grim expression. "It's worse than we thought, Hill. The Malin's experiments have destabilized her neural pathways," Dr. Chen explained, her voice tinged with worry. Walter watched as energy crackled around Lily's body. "What exactly are we dealing with?" he asked. Chen pulled up a holographic display showing a chaotic swirl of neural activity. Her latent psionic abilities have been supercharged. If we can't contain this, the resulting shockwave could wipe out all life on Earth. Walter's mind focused. "What are our options?" "We need someone to link with her mind," Chen explained, "to ground her powers and help her channel them safely. Your enhanced physiology makes you the ideal candidate." "The risks?" Walter asked, already knowing the answer. "Severe neural trauma, possible loss of self, death," Chen replied quietly. Walter nodded, his decision already made. "Let's do it." Minutes later, Walter lay on a bed next to Lily, electrodes dotting his scalp. Scientists swarmed around them, making final preparations. "Initiating neural sync," Chen announced. Walter felt a jolt, then his world exploded into chaos. Raw, unfiltered power surged through his mind. He screamed, every nerve on fire. Beside him, Lily convulsed, her mind a roiling storm of energy and fear. Images flashed before Walter's eyes. Alien laboratories, twisted experiments, the vastness of space. He struggled to assert control, focusing on Lily's presence. He imagined himself as an anchor in a stormy sea. Slowly, painfully, order began to emerge from the chaos. The maelstrom of energy coalesced into streams of information. Walter gasped, his eyes snapping open. "I can see it," he panted. "The Malin's plans, their research, everything." Chen leaned over him, eyes wide. "What do you see?" "Coordinates," Walter said. "Dozens of hidden facilities. And their endgame, they're not just after our psionic potential. They want to harvest our entire species." In the days that followed, Walter led strike teams against Malin outposts across the galaxy. Each mission pushed him to his limits as he balanced combat with containing Lily's volatile powers. During one assault on a Malin research station, Walter felt Lily's control slipping. Energy built within him, threatening to explode outward. "No," he gritted his teeth, willing the power back. But it was too much. A shockwave of pure psionic force erupted from Walter's body, Malin and human ships alike spinning out of control, their systems fried. Walter collapsed to his knees, blood trickling from his nose. In that moment, he faced a choice. He could sever the link, saving himself from the overwhelming power, or he could dive deeper, risking everything to maintain control. Walter chose Lily. He plunged into the roiling sea of her consciousness, letting the full force of her power wash over him. Pain unlike anything he'd ever experienced tore through his mind. But he held on. Seconds stretched into eternity as Walter's will clashed with cosmic forces. Finally, mercifully, the storm subsided. Walter opened his eyes, forever changed. Lily's thoughts mingled freely with his own. Her memories became his memories. Her pain became his pain. As the tide of war shifted in humanity's favor, Walter found himself haunted by dual sets of nightmares. His own combat experiences blended with Lily's recollections of Malin torture. He sat alone in his quarters, hands shaking as he tried to sort through the jumble of thoughts and emotions. The once clear line between Walter Hill and Lily blurred with each passing day. A chime sounded. "Commander," a voice called. "The War Council is assembling. They need your input on the final assault." Walter stood, steadying himself. He could feel the cracks forming in his psyche, hairline fractures that threatened to shatter completely. But humanity needed him, needed them. He took a deep breath and stepped out to face whatever came next. The final battle. Walter stood on the bridge of the EDF terminus, his hands gripping the command console as sweat beaded on his forehead. The massive dreadnought hummed with pent-up energy, its experimental psychotronic amplifiers sending tingles through his body. "All systems primed, Commander," the tactical officer reported. "Operation Mindfire is go." Walter nodded, his lips pursed tight. He felt the weight of Earth's hopes pressing down on him, along with the constant turmoil of Lily's consciousness intertwined with his own. The physical distance between them only intensified the mental strain. "Launch," he ordered, his voice tight. The terminus surged forward, leading the massive human armada towards the Malin staging grounds. As they approached the enemy lines, Walter reached out with his mind, feeling the amplifiers boost his power to unprecedented levels. With a thought, he seized control of the massive ship. The crew gasped as the terminus accelerated to impossible speeds, plowing through the Malin defense platforms like they were made of paper. Alien energy beams splashed harmlessly against the hull as Walter erected psionic shields around the human fleet. The battle erupted in earnest. Walter stood at the center of the storm, his mind expanded across the battlefield. He saw through the eyes of every human pilot, felt the terror of every Malin warrior as he tore their ships apart with titanic blasts of pure psychic energy. But with each exertion, Walter felt his grip on reality slipping. Memories assaulted him, his own brutal combat experiences blending with Lily's nightmarish recollections of Malin experiments. He staggered, nearly falling as his consciousness splintered. "Sir," a concerned crewman reached out to steady him. Walter shook his head, forcing himself to focus. He could feel different aspects of his personality warring for control. The cold tactician demanding he press the attack ruthlessly, the protective guardian urging caution. Thinking of Lily and the other innocents caught in this war, a primal part of him howling for vengeance against the Malin. Gritting his teeth, Walter pushed through the mental chaos. He spotted the Malin psionic control nexus, a massive construct at the heart of their fleet. If he could destroy it, the entire invasion would crumble. "All ahead full," he shouted. "Target that nexus." The terminus plunged deeper into the enemy formation. Walter lashed out with his powers, smashing Malin ships aside. But as they closed in on their target, he felt a sudden, searing pain lancing through his mind. Alien psionic warriors aboard the nexus had launched their own attack. Walter screamed as their mental assault tore into his fractured psyche, threatening to shatter his consciousness completely. In that moment of agony, a final aspect of Walter's personality crystallized. The unyielding human warrior, sworn to protect his species at any cost. With supreme effort, he reached out to Lily across the vast distance separating them. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then he seized the full measure of her psionic potential, channeling it through his own body and the ship's amplifiers. A blinding wave of psychic energy erupted from the terminus. It engulfed the Malin nexus, obliterating it, and every alien ship for thousands of kilometers. The cosmic conflagration consumed Walter's body, leaving nothing but ashes. As consciousness faded, Walter felt a sense of peace. He had done his duty. Humanity would survive. The crippled terminus drifted silently amidst the devastated Malin armada. On its bridge, the stunned crew stared at the empty space where their commander had stood only moments before. Back on Earth, alarms blared as the monitors tracking Walter and Lily flatlined simultaneously. In the observation room, General Mattis watched grimly as the tactical displays showed the annihilation of the Malin invasion force. "My God," he breathed. "He actually did it." Dr. Chen approached, her face pale. "Sir," Walter and Lily are both gone. The psychic feedback. Mattis nodded heavily. I know, but their sacrifice just saved our entire species. He turned to face the assembled staff, his expression grim yet resolute. This victory came at a terrible cost, he said. But it proves that even in the face of alien terrors and cosmic forces, the strength of the human spirit remains our greatest weapon. Now we must honor their memory by. Before he could finish, the building shook with a violent tremor. Alarms wailed, and the lights flickered ominously. Sir, a soldier burst into the room, his face pale with fear. We have a situation. Multiple Melon ships have just entered the atmosphere. They're targeting the facility. Mattis's eyes widened. Prepare the defenses. We can't let them take us down now. The facility's defenses roared to life, energy shields crackling as they deflected the initial barrage of Malin fire. But the aliens were relentless, their ships swarming like angry hornets. Mattis turned to Dr. Chen. Get everyone to the bunkers. We need to protect the remaining research at all costs. Dr. Chen nodded, rushing to coordinate the evacuation. As the battle raged outside, Mattis took a moment to reflect on the sacrifices made by Walter and Lily. He vowed to honor their memory by ensuring that humanity would stand strong against the Malin threat, no matter the cost.